All right. So we're going to get started with LaurenMalhoit from IASTA. She's going to talk about her experience with SRM and her slide deck is coming up right now as we speak. Shortly after that, Kyle's going to come up and talk about SRM, and we're going to do all the giveaways. We have a boatload of giveaways. Make sure you stick around for that. And I think we are going to get, make sure you guys fill out the surveys. I've got a stack of surveys up here, so make sure that by the end of the surveys you have your paper up here so that we can enter you into the drawing. All right.
Hey everyone, as Mike said, I'm LaurenMalhoit. I hope you had a lot to drink during the break because the more you drink, the better my reputation gets. So yes, like I said, I'll be talking about the recovery manager along with Kyle. I'll be doing kind of just the basics, SRM, and Kyle is talking more about easier replication. So, sorry, we couldn't get the clicker to work, so we're doing this old school. Obviously, you have to start your presentation with a little cartoon or something to get everyone's attention. But just basically, like Chris was saying, a lot of us don't have or aren't prepared for disaster recovery or disaster avoidance. So here's the run plan that exists currently in a lot of companies, actually. So basically, I'm just going to go through and give you the basic steps of how to configure SRM 5, or at least how I did it, and hopefully it works out for you. Obviously, you need to replicate your ones from your protected site to recovery site. Chris went over that a little bit and had some graphics. Different vendors use different things. We use EMC mirror view at my site. They have a recovery point as well.
Is this presentation going to be on the site too?
They all offer something that will allow you to replicate your lungs between both your protected site and your recovery site. And I have a little shameless plug at the bottom there. I can send out the slides of a blog I wrote on how to do it with mirror view now, because it's a little different with the SRAs. The initial install, very easy. You just have to go to your protected site, your vCenter, and your protected site, and download the SRM installer. Install it, and then you also want to download the SRA, which is the storage replication or storage recovery adapter from probably VMware, but you may need to also download something from your storage provider. Like we do with MirrorView, there's an extra enabler that you include with that. You do the same thing at your recovery site. So on the vCenter /SRM server, just download and install it. It's easy install. Just go through a wizard. Not much to it. And then make sure you install your SRM plugin on your vSphere client, because that's stuff I always forget and I don't know where the hell to configure things then. And just a little caveat. Basically 95% of the time, if you have any trouble with SRM, a restart of the vCenter servers, or at least the SRM service, is going to fix it. That's what I've found. A lot of times there will be connection issues, or won't see your SRA, things like that. Or a restart usually does the trick. Okay, so this is the first screen that you'll see when you have SRM installed. This is when you go to your SRM plugin. It's basically in order here. You can follow it along. It's a really simple setup. I mean, obviously it's more complicated the bigger your environment, the more recovery plans you have, the more that you have in your run plan. But I'm just going to go through these steps real quick and show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so to configure the connection, you literally just click on the configure connection link. You enter in your remote site. So if you're doing this at your protected site, and one thing that is very cool about SRM 5 is that you don't have to switch in between both sites. You don't have to keep up both vCenters. You just do the whole configuration with one vCenter and just kind of click on which site you're at. So as you can see, it's easy. After that, you just enter your credentials in. If you're using like a VMware service or an SRM service account, just enter in those credentials, make sure it has the correct permissions. And hopefully it gives you all green check marks as you go through. Then you configure all of your mappings. So you have your resource mappings, which is if you have resource groups configured. Chris hit on that a little bit. If you do have resource groups at your protected site, you can map those to either, you don't necessarily have to have resource groups at your recovery site, so you can just map it directly to your data center or cluster, whatever you have. Or you can have one resource group and map it to that. It's not picky. You can do basically whatever you want. Just make sure you click the pull down menu and select the proper one. Folder mapping is the same thing. I don't know if a lot of you have folders are configured, but just, you know, you want a one-to-one mapping, or it can be many-to-one. Just make sure you map it all out. The network mappings are a little different. Chris talked about testing. You can actually choose an auto network, which means when you fail over, it will put all of your VMs in an isolated network, and that's when you can test it. So you might not have, or you won't have, a connection like via RDP to these VMs, and it won't be able to communicate with the physical servers that aren't on that particular network, but you would be able to communicate within those VMs, and therefore test to see if the application comes up, things like that. You can also configure it to go to a real network at your recovery site. So if you do want it to test it and still want it to, sorry, I'm in the way, still want it to communicate with a physical server perhaps, you can tell it to go to a certain network that you have configured at the other side. And a lot of people will configure this, and there's an option to change IPs that I'll go through later, or use a NAT device at the other side. So you can keep the IPs, but it changes them over. Obviously, we all know how NAT works, I'm sure. And you can also use stretched VLANs, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people put it down, but in the future, it might be more beneficial to use it. A stretched VLAN, the stretched clusters might come more into play in SRM, and kind of getting a head start on that now, and getting your network team involved. Or if you're like me and you are also a network team, you might consider that. Okay, the placeholder data store. This is where your recovery VMs are, and I'll show a little video later. Hopefully you'll kind of see. I don't know if you'll get the audio, but there's a data store already configured at your recovery site, obviously. This is not the data store that is being replicated. This is just a data store where maybe your vCenter server is on. Maybe you have a few other servers on it. But it's already existing, and you're just using it to be a placeholder. It's not all the VMs. You'll see them populate on your vSphere server or your VI client, and then you will see that they're there, and they take up a little space on this data store, but it's not a full. It doesn't take up the full space that a normal VM would. So again, that's not the actual replicated data store. It's just like it says, a placeholder. Then there's the adding array manager stuff. This is basically, you have to configure on both sides. Say you do the protected site first. You want to just put it in the IP address that you use to access your storage, and then the credentials that go along with that, so that it can see your arrays on both sides. And then you go to the recovery site and do the same thing. And you want to make sure that it can see everything. If you can't see it right away, there is an option now in SRM 5 to rescan the HBA, so you don't have to go through and restart everything. You can try and just rescan. If you still can't see it, it's possible that your SRA is not configured correctly or installed correctly, and you'll have to restart it. And if you still can't see it, you might check that your LUN is replicating properly. Other such things. Check your storage. A lot of times that can be an issue. Okay, now the protection groups and recovery plans. Protection group consists of the VMs that you're protecting. You want to choose the data store that you'd like to recover. Maybe you have multiple data stores. We have one that is using the whole one that we replicate. And then again, make sure that that one is being replicated, or else it won't work, obviously. The recovery plan is the same thing as your run plan, except like Chris said, it's automated. You'll go through the steps. It's a wizard again. You choose the protection group that you configured earlier. You can configure multiple recovery plans. So for instance, if you want to configure maybe a test plan or a certain plan migration plan or a failover disaster recovery plan, you can configure all those different recovery plans with SRM. And modifications can be made then, so like a run plan. You can prioritize startup order. So right now I think they have 5 priority levels. So if you have VMs that are, that other VMs depend on, you want to start up those first, or maybe you have tier 1 apps that you want to make sure start up first. You want to put those to priority 1 level, and then on down from there, and there's 5 levels again. I'm not sure why you do 5, but maybe some people do use that. And this is also where you would change IPs if you choose to go that route. There is a little wizard now. It used to be kind of convoluted, and you had to fill out almost like an Excel sheet to make it work, but it's a little more wizard oriented now. So it's easier, and basically you just map the IPs like you did with the network mappings earlier. And you can also configure startup actions, so if you don't want a VM to power on right away, you fail it over, you can tell it to stay powered off, and it will do that. SRM 5 does now have failback, but it's not really failback. Basically, you either have to have 2-way replication configured with your storage, or you have to reverse the replication, which we all know, we have like 2 terabytes that we're replicating, and that takes, at least 3 weeks to replicate, with our current setup. So, that's not exactly a quick and easy, hit the failback button and it works. So you need to make sure that you're actually replicating back the other way. You also want to make sure your network is set up properly. If you change your DNS, because you changed your IPs, things like that, your external DNS entries, you want to make sure that you change those back. And there's not actually a failback button. You have to re-protect the group at the old recovery site and then hit the recovery button again. So you're really just doing process in reverse. And it's a little easier than it was in the previous versions, but not quite as easy as hitting a failback button. All right, now I do have a little video. We'll see how this goes. Alright, I'm not showing the whole 16 minutes, don't worry. But this will just give you a little idea of what it looks like, and it'll be a little more interesting than me going through slides and talking about it.